So, one of the things that I've wanted to talk about is sort of the pitfalls of romances and looking at the positives and the negative aspects of it. So, it's not just about the pitfalls, but it is a major component of one of the issues that I find with a lot of romance animes, and that is not so much the romances itself, but the community surrounding it. Because here's the thing, money talks. And if a story, whether a light novel or a manga, because that's generally what the source material is based on when it comes to an anime, if a story instantly drops off the interest of it after something happens, then an author is less likely to do that if they know something is going to happen if they do something in a story. And what I mean by that is confessions. And what I mean by that is then what follows after a confession, an answer. And what comes from an answer is generally the kissy kissy get together, and then that's generally what a lot of fans will see as the conclusion to the story. Is the final endgame to a rom-com, is them getting together. And then a lot of fans will drop off, which is why you do see a lot of rom-coms that generally will drag it out as long as humanly possible, to the one point that you wonder if it's ever going to see the light of day of it being ended. Rent a Girlfriend. And that is an issue. And it's very clear that when you know that your audience is just waiting for the ending before they drop off and go read something else or just stop caring because they go, oh, I know how they got together, because that's the most important part, a lot of authors have a tendency to be scared of doing that. And so that's one of the biggest issues when it comes to rom-coms themselves. Now, there are many different other types of romances and rom-coms that have been done in other stories. You look at Darmachi as an example. The major key component of Belle's goal is to catch up to Eyes so he can stand side by side so that he can finally do his confession and be like, I love you, you saved me in the dungeon, let's get together. And then they live happily ever after. But there's also side objectives there as well, as Belle's, he's not trying to be a hero, he's just being a hero because that's what certain other individuals want to push him towards. But by him chasing his goal of wanting to be with Eyes, he is also chasing that goal of being a hero. It's like kind of like a bit of a side quest. Though I do feel like some people will tell me in the comments that actually the romance is the side objective and the heroism is the main objective. Depending on the perspective of how you look at the story, if you're looking at it from Belle's eyes, the main objective is Eyes. But if you're reading the story, then you might see the main objective being him being a hero, because that's what it's trying to... But again, what I prefer is to see what Belle's main objective is as a story component, because you look at what is Belle's objective. What does Belle want? And that's something I think also is an issue when it comes to romances, is readers ignore what the actual main characters want in the story, and then they force this whole idea of, no, you have to do this because I want you to do that, even though the main character wants to do something else. That is an issue when it comes to things like harems. That is still something of a component of rom-coms, is when you have other love interests. Whether it's just two girls, which isn't a harem, fighting over one individual, or if it's a multitude of girls, which then turns into a harem. Again, just going to repeat, not going to get into the different definitions of harem. I base my definition on the Japanese version, because that's what's important. So for me, when you look at these different types of stories, there are many different layers to them, and there's strengths and weaknesses. Again, Darmachi is a great example of that. Belle's objectives in his life, what he's trying to achieve. Then you look at other things like Alya sometimes has her feelings in Russian. That's a series that has a bit of a gimmick behind it, where from the title of itself, she hides her feelings in Russian. And that's something a lot of rom-coms also have to do, is they have to put gimmicks in. Because rom-coms have been done so much over the years, it's kind of hard to keep things fresh unless you just do the exact same tried and true method, which also comes at a double-edged sword, because you get people like Joey who will tell you how every single new story out there is bad because, oh, it tries to do something new and original, and then he complains that when they don't do something new and original, you're doomed if you do, you're doomed if you don't. I try to look at it from that perspective of, at least they're trying to do something gimmicky, but can they execute the gimmick? And in situations like Alya sometimes has her feelings in Russian, I think they do quite a good job. It's also about the balance of the gimmick. Don't use it too much, but don't use it too little to the point where people forget that that's the entire point of the story being named after. I use Alya sometimes has her feelings in Russian as an example, but you could use things like Love is War, where the two main protagonists are sort of in that battle of trying to get the other to confess as like one up, and it ends up turning into this kind of crazy situation. Those are just a couple of examples. Then you've also got the issue of the characters being together at the very beginning. Use an example of Shigemori is not just a cutie. I remember watching that and thinking, this is cool. I like the concept of that they're together at the start of the story. It doesn't get done that often. And there's a reason why. Because it gets controversy. Oh, it's boring. Oh, they should have started it before they got together. That would have been a better story. That's literally the same as every other rom-com out there, where they meet each other and then get together at the end of the story. That's like 80% of rom-coms out there. Probably more like 90%. And the one time they do a story where they're actually together at the start of the story, you get the odd comment of being like, oh, maybe they should have just copy-pasted the exact same thing every other rom-com did, so that I can then complain that they copied every other rom-com. That's the problem that I have with the anime community. That's the kind of mindset that we have now, is people complaining about something being original, and then when they do something original, they complain that it's original. Joey. But hey, when you're very bitter and you're very angry and you're trying to be a hipster, that's what you're going to do. You're just going to look for things to nitpick, which is why I think we're at this kind of inflection point where we have things like Rent a Girlfriend, where a story just continuously goes on and on and on and on and on until you question if the series will outlive everyone on this goddamn planet, and somehow Reggie will still be riding in another 10 million years, going around in a circle with the main protagonist still somehow having the financial support. Don't know how we would have the money, because it doesn't make any sense, of it just endlessly going on. And at this point, I think most of the community just wants to see how long he drags it out for, and what kind of groundbreaking art that he will make, and what kind of weird, creepy tweets he'll make, where he draws over stuff of his current married wife, where he draws over his fictional character, because it seems to be he's more in love with his fictional character than he is his own goddamn wife. My god. Yeah, I've triggered the entire Rent-A-Girlfriend community. But hey, Mommy did nothing wrong. There, I really did stir some stuff. The thing is that that's a situation that you can have, is that when you're too scared to have a conclusion to the story, because you know people are going to drop off at the end, let's say they actually, or he confesses, she says, I love you too. They get together, they kiss, they make out, they live happily ever. But as soon as that happens, everyone drops off. They just go, oh yep, I've seen the confession, I don't care anymore. That's what people want to see in these kinds of rom-coms, which is when the author gets too scared to do that, which is then when you have Rent-A-Girlfriend. When an author's too scared to do that because they know the moment they do it, everyone's going to, well, a large portion is going to drop off. That's an issue that you do have. And then you see those in light novels do the exact same, where they just try and sort of build a story. The best thing to do in that situation is just make a good story, have a conclusion, and then give it at least one volume to sort of the after part of them being happily ever after, doing some small things, maybe they have a kid, that kind of thing. You look at Boarding School Romeo and Juliet. That's a series that I really like. No one really talks about it because it was a pretty niche anime, but I loved it. I've got the mangas. The fact is I like the fact that it goes into that sort of romance, and then the final stages of it is giving a little bit of the after story, but not too long. You can balance it. It is a hard balance though. And then you've got crazy stuff like High School DxD, where yeah, it is a romance. Issei is in love with Rias, Rias is in love with Issei, Issei is also in love with a bunch of other girls, and a bunch of other girls are in love with him, and he's got a giant harem. Congratulations. It's a happily ever after. But see, what's interesting there is that even though he knows that the girls like him, and he likes the girls, or some of the girls like him, and he knows that, and some of them haven't fully admitted yet, the story is still progressing because the main objective is not the romance. It's a whole bunch of other stuff. Yes, the romance is a major key component, but it's not the only thing. That's what I love about High School DxD, is that the show itself has multiple sort of lines going along with it. You can have one thick line of it being, as what you would say, the romance, but there are other things going on, like the showman aspect, like the power battle dynamics, the power going up, them going up in Devil Society, them fighting new villains, them finding new gods and goddesses and powerful entities, all these crazy kind of things going on. And because also it is a harem, there are multiple girls in it, so yes, he can add one girl and then add another. That's one of the benefits of being a harem, is that he can add them like he's collecting Pokemon. Just gotta catch them all. one after another. Hopefully he leaves some for me. Maybe he could leave me Akano, but I don't like my chances. The thing is that you can do rom-coms in many different ways, but sometimes they don't work out well. And sometimes they're just an absolute mess, which is kind of more funny, because the reason why I'm doing this video is because I've watched 6 videos in a row of people dunking on Rent-A-Girlfriend, which is more hilarious because I question who still reads that. And to be honest, I don't blame them. I'd be that invested in it too if I got that far in. But there is a point where you kind of ask yourself, when is too much? And then you look at other series out there that I absolutely love, which is tying the knot with the Amagi sisters, another new manga that, well, it's not a new manga, but a new anime that's just recently aired, which is a comedy harem romance. And I love how the main protagonist actually does have a personality, has his own personal drives. The girls, each individually, have their own quirks about them, and they have their own development, and they have some history. That's the thing that I like about some of these good romances out there, and even light novels, is that there are ways to do romances with a long-term story. Because, yeah, you don't want your favorite series to just end in a couple of volumes, like, say, 6, 7, 8, 9, or 10. You want it to go on for a while. You want to get emotionally invested, which is why you can go down that rabbit hole of 30 to 40 to 50 volumes of no real development. But the thing is, you can have development if you give characters depth. And I say that with emphasis, depth. And especially when you've got multitude of girls, you can do a lot of growing for more than just one male, one female. You can have multiple females, especially if it's a harem, like, say, like the Amagi sisters. But when you have something like Rent-A-Girlfriend, where the main protagonist kind of just drops girls in and out when it's convenient for the plot point, when you all know who the main girl is, then it's one of those where you kind of feel like it's just been drawn out with very minimal flavor being added to it. And then you have Damachi, which has a multitude of girls. You're kind of asking yourself, should this end up being a harem at the end? But then you're like, well, it's probably not going to be, because clearly Belle's feelings are towards Eyes. And see, that's another problem when it comes to romances, is when you know the clear objective, but you kind of are questioning what the author's trying to do. And that's when you start to get civil war within a community, because some people say, no, it's a harem and it's going to end a harem. And then some are going, yes, it's a harem, but it's clear what Belle's feelings are and what Belle wants to go towards. And then people will go, but the grandfather said this. And it's like, yes, but what the grandfather wants and what Belle wants are two different things. But it's his blood. It's like, no, the grandfather is not his blood. Zeus is not his blood grandfather. It's adopted. So to be very clear there. But that's another issue, as I mentioned before, is sometimes the fans want to force the story in a certain direction that contradicts what the character wants. And so this is one of the crazy things about rom-coms, is that they can be really fun, crazy, all these cool things going on, but then the audience sometimes wants to steer it in a very specific direction. And that's where it can become a double-edged sword, because sticking the landing at the end is extremely hard when the audience, or some of the audience, might not want what's going to end up happening. And then you get the issue as, what the saying is, the squeaky wheel gets the grease. But in this case, they don't get the grease. They're just really squeaky. They're really loud. They're really obnoxious. And they go, I don't like this. I don't like this. I don't like this. And it looks like a large portion of the community is upset. But in reality, it's a very small portion of the community upset. But they're just making the most amount of noise, because most people that are happy with the series are going to read it, say they like it, and move on. They're not the ones that are emotionally upset or disjointed because it didn't go the way they want. And that's something else you've got to be mindful of, is that just because a content creator or a fan or a large account or Reddit or whatnot complains about something doesn't mean that they speak for the whole community. That is something that I see quite prevalently, and especially in something like DxD, where some people got very upset at the last season, not even for the romance story point of view, but they get loud, they get obnoxious, they scream at the top of their lungs, and then you realize that they're just being really loud, but they're not the majority of the community, which is why sometimes it's better to take a step back, look at things from an outside perspective. It's one of the things that I absolutely love about the community, the anime community, and also hate about it, is that it's fascinating to watch how it interacts amongst each other. But for me, if you can take anything away from this video, is that I like rambling, but also rom-coms are those that are a double-edged sword. What the community wants and then what the community gets, and then how the community can steer a writer in a certain direction. Like I stated before, when fans will drop something because it's got that conclusion of them kissing, being together, and then people drop it, it incentivizes an author to do things in a certain way, because again, it's not like they just want to write something that no one reads. They want to write something that everyone can enjoy along with themselves, because again, they've still got to make money, which then incentivizes them sometimes to do things that may not be for the best interest of the story. And that's one of the concerns. That's also one of the reasons why you do get some gimmicky type of stories. Some do hit and some not so much. But I'd love to know your thoughts in the comment section down below. What gimmicky stories do you like? Like, as I mentioned before, Alya sometimes has her feelings in Russian. Or quintessential quintuplets, because it's that kind of thing. We Never Learn, which I think was masterfully done, because the ending has multiple endings. That I want to see more of in light novels and in mangas, which is more hilarious because when it did get announced, people were like, oh, you can't do that because that only makes sense to do in a game. Why? Why can something not be done in a light novel or in a manga format? What, because it's not been done before? And that's another issue, is that fans will complain and say, well, no, it can't be done. Why? Because it hasn't been done before. That's the best time to try it. Will it fail? Who cares? Try it anyway. You're either going to fail or succeed. But you're never going to succeed if you never try. And that's the problem with a lot of authors, is they are getting too scared, because the failure and getting mocked and ridiculed is even more worse than them just trying and hoping for success. That's why I do take my hat off to a lot of authors that do try to do interesting stories. Whether they execute it or not is one thing. But when you look at some of those stories out there, like one that I've been reading recently, Alya Sometimes Her Feelings in Russian, I like what it tries to do. It tries to do things differently. Yes, there's some foundational kind of stuff in there, school setting, council, school events, beach episodes. Yes, there are fundamental pillars in a romance rom-com in a school setting that are always going to be there. But it doesn't mean that you can't try and add some little bit of spice in there. And that's what I like to see. So again, love to know your thoughts in the comment section down below. What types of gimmicks do you like seeing in a rom-com? And what type of gimmicky stories like that would you recommend me looking at reading? Not so much reading, but maybe watching the anime and having a squiz at. So again, if you like this video, hit the like, subscribe, and I'll see you beautiful nerds in the next video.